Hey, what's up, YouTube? Welcome to my channel, Ask Jimmy Smith. Today, I am excited to be bringing to you, I guess this is part 3 of the video series I have on reviewing weird Keepa graphs for Amazon FBA. So if you're a newer seller, even more of an experienced seller, I'm actually going to be reviewing Keepa graphs that were submitted to me by you and by members of my private replens Facebook group. And so I'm excited to be able to go through some of these weird Keepa graphs because for whether you're new or advanced sellers, a lot of times we can look at Keepa charts and be confused as to what we're seeing. And so I wanted to give my take on it. You know, I may not be right. I may be wrong on some of these, but I'll give you my best guess. Also, this is going to be my best analysis based off of the information presented to me. So obviously, since these were submitted, these are screenshots. I don't actually have any specific ASINs for these. They were just all sent to me. I will be showing the Keepa graphs and any other information that was sent to me about it. But ultimately, we're going to be just checking what it is that I think of the particular Keepa graph based off that information. Now, when not knowing the profitability of certain products, I'm just going to assume these are profitable products in the majority of cases, and I'll kind of walk through my my thought process with these Keepa graphs. But first, I do want to review a couple things. The 3 main things that we're going to be looking for on any Keepa chart. The very first one is the sales rank line. And so that, as you will see, is the green up and down line showing whenever a product is selling or when there's movement in the sales rank in that particular instance. The second thing is going to be the pink line. If I have an older graph for whatever reason that was submitted to me, they are dots on the older graph. But either way, the pink coloration in the top box we're going to be looking at first or as the second option. And then the third option is the seller trend graph, or the purple line in the bottom box. And so I'm going to be going through those 3 main things. There's more that you can do with Keepa. You can check out my whole entire Keepa playlist if you're interested in seeing a bunch of videos as well as parts 1 and 2 to this series. But you can also head over to my website. I have a free training guide for how to evaluate Keepa graphs. It's a 16-page guide, completely free at AskJimmySmith.com/Keepa guide. And there is where you'll get the guide that I actually use to train my employees, what I've used to train people, and the over 1,000 success stories that have come through my course. It's the same exact guide that I go through there, as well as in my book, Side Hustle to Full-Time Income. So that is another place, if you're interested in Keepa training, that is another place you can go. But this Keepa guide is the best of what I've been able to put together for training people, and I know that you'll love it too. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the weird Keepa graphs. I'm going to go through about 4 or 5 of them, most likely, and then we will obviously be at the end of that. You can check out the other Keepa trainings on my playlists on my channel. So this very first one, you can see if we're checking, let me just go through these very briefly, these first 3 things. So the first thing is the sales rank line. And so if you don't know what that is this green line going up and down here. Every time it drops, that is typically at least 1 sale of that item. Now, it may have been multiple things ordered within an order. So maybe somebody ordered 5 units. It may be that 5 sales happened within a relatively short period of time. Ultimately, though, as these drops get closer and closer together, it is harder to discern that, and it's also harder for Keepa to keep up with it. But as they get further and further apart, it is actually something that Keepa is very good at determining whenever 1 sale happens. I see that it's typically more accurate if they're further apart than if they're close together. If they're close together, it's actually usually selling more than what it's showing on the graph. So just keep that in mind. Now, by looking at the sales rank graph, it's selling. You can see it's going up and down regularly. I feel pretty confident that it will sell based off of that information. The second thing that we want to look at is the pink line, or the dots if it's an older graph. So you can see this one, there are some pink dots here, and then it eventually turned into a line. And so that's what we're looking at now. But ultimately, these dots to me are showing that, okay, back about a year ago at the time of this screenshot, this was selling at around $13. If I'm looking between the $12 and $14 price point, this was selling at $13. And then recently it's been up at about $15 whenever it is in stock. And the way that you know whether or not something has been in and out of stock is actually currently by looking at the seller trend graph in this bottom line. You can see that this bottom line, or this purple line, disappears at various times. And when it disappears, so does this price up here. And so that means that they are selling out of their product. because they obviously are coming in and off of this particular product because they're selling out. So in this particular case, this would be something that I would test, as long as I know that if it dropped down to $13 again, I'd be able to break even or make some money there. If I'm real close to breaking even at the $15 price point, I wouldn't test it because it most likely wouldn't meet my profitability metrics anyway. But ultimately, this is something that I would test. I like that actually it's hard for them to keep it in stock, that every time they come in stock, they sell out of the product. That means it has a lot more demand. And I also like that this has been a very stable price point. Now, I'm assuming this was something that was submitted to me because somebody may have been concerned about this being a private label product or a wholesale type product. There's nothing that you can really do to be 100% sure of whether or not this is a good thing to take a risk on. You can check to see who the seller is every time they come in stock on it if you'd like. But since it did used to have multiple sellers and now it's just something that doesn't stay in stock, I'm assuming it's not as much of a private label or a wholesale product, because usually you'll see one solid line at the bottom with maybe a break here or there if it is a private label or a wholesale product. So I would most likely test this, unless for some reason I'm looking at the seller name and the name of the product, and they're the exact same. I've actually made a whole separate video on red flags to look out for basically watching out for private label sellers and wholesale exclusives on listings. But this one doesn't, with the information I have right now, concern me. So I would test this based off the fact that it's moving up and down regularly. So there's sales. It is selling out regularly at this price point, and the price is fairly steady as well, or actually very steady at around the $15 price point. All right, so the second one, let's see what we got. Oh, this one's okay. Yeah. So this one's obviously a little bit weird. For many people, it might be something that you'd pass on. This is something that I would want to check the entirety of the listing, because it doesn't have much history here. We're just looking at the year, which is what I usually recommend. But there's 3,588 days of history from Keepa. So if I were to look at this and see that it used to sell a ton, well, then I may be much more likely to test this out. But let's go ahead and look at those three options again. First, the sales rank line. Well, the sales rank line just recently appeared and is now skyrocketing up there. What this tells me is that it actually, more than likely, I could be wrong here, and I'm just going to give that caveat, more than likely it's sold. And so Amazon gave it a sales rank again, and now it hasn't sold again since that first sale. That's my guess. The second thing we want to look at is the pink line, or the dots. Now, in this case, there's not much history there, but the pink line has stayed fairly steady for the last 3 weeks or whatever it is, according to this graph. And then lastly, the seller trend graph. There's actually 3 sellers all of a sudden, which I think is kind of odd that 3 showed up at the exact same time. 1 dropped off for whatever reason, and then now it's back up to 3. So personally, if I were looking at this, if I were outsourcing either in retail arbitrage or online arbitrage, I would want to see the full entirety. It does make me feel pretty good that I believe it did sell at least once very quickly. I would probably still, let's say we look at the entirety of it and it doesn't have very good history, or you can't really tell well, I would give it a couple more months and just put it on a list to monitor. If you use Replan Dashboard or something similar, you can actually track products. So you could enter it in as a product to be tracked on Replan Dashboard if you want to use that at replandashboard.com. Or you can just set it aside into a Google Sheet and make sure to check it in a couple months, put it in your Google Calendar, whatever you need to do. But ultimately, you want to take a look at this probably a couple months from now. But again, if I were to look and see all the history and it used to sell like crazy and we're getting in early, I might actually test out a couple if that is what I was seeing by looking at all the history. So let's look at the next graph. Okay, this one's a little bit more normal. They did give a note and says that it does have variations. You can actually see that in the Keepa chart here. It shows variations. Whenever there aren't any variations, that little box doesn't show up. I've done a full video on this channel as well on how to evaluate variations using Keepa. Highly recommend checking that out because there's a ton of information and ways to do that. But without knowing all of that information, I'm just going to go just blind here and give you my first initial thoughts. So there's a few things that you can do whenever there are variations on a product. You have to realize that this first thing, the sales rank line, is typically going to be deceptive. You can see actually here where this product was out of stock, as we've already talked about before. that the sales rank was still going up and down. So Keepa is showing that it's selling. Well, that's not true for this variation because it was out of stock. It's impossible for the sales rank to go up and down. And that's the issue with variations, is it's very difficult to tell if something is selling by that sales rank line. So you have to almost discount it. If you see that there's variations on the listing, you could even turn off the sales rank line if that helps you. But I would do whatever I can to avoid looking at the green, because that is deceptive and it's showing the entirety of the other variations connected to it, not just its own thing. So let's take a look at the second thing then, since we can't look at the sales rank line. The second is the pink line or dots. In this case, we've got line there, but we also have mainly dots. It looks like the price, even if we're looking at the blue dots instead of the pink one, because maybe there's no buy box at this time, it looks like the price stays roughly around $10, between 10 to 15. I would want to make sure that I could break even at this $10 price point, since that's where it used to sell at. So even if I listed it at 13 or 14 bucks based off of its current pricing, I'd want to make sure that I could make some money if it dropped down to 10 again, or at least get my money back out of it by breaking even there. So that's not super concerning. It's not extraordinarily volatile in pricing. It's actually pretty decent, all things considered. But then let's look at the last thing, which is the seller trend graph. As I already mentioned, you can see that it actually went out of stock for a little bit here. So whenever we're dealing with variations, there's a few things to look out for. So first, the red flag that I see here is that there were a bunch of sellers that were slowly going down, and then all of a sudden they all dropped off. Now, that could be for a couple reasons. One, it could have been an IP claim, something that, maybe the brand got rid of a bunch of sellers very quickly. Or it could have been something where maybe this was easily available as an online arbitrage product, and you had drop shippers that were on this listing technically illegally according to Amazon's policies, that then couldn't find it anymore because it went out of stock at Walmart or went out of stock at Target or whatever, and now they took their listings down. That is 100% possible. Keep that in mind. It does look like more sellers have come on and off this listing. So I would potentially still try to sell this depending on who the actual sellers were. So I would double check that. As I mentioned earlier in the video, is the brand the one selling the product? Or is there anything, if you use AZ Insight / ASINZen, they've got an IP alert. You can look for IP alert and see if there's any IP issues with this brand. Or you could actually, if you're in the Facebook group, it's a free Facebook group, you could ask and see if people have had any issues with a particular brand as well, if you wanted to put that out there. The free Facebook group I recommend is the My Silent Team Facebook group. It's over 70,000 members at the time of this recording. I am a moderator in it, but it's a completely free group. It's bit.ly/M as in Mary, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, group, MST group, and the link's in the description as well for you. But you could post in there just to see if anybody else have had any issues with a particular brand if you wanted to do that. Ultimately, though, if I'm looking at this, I would potentially test this if I can break even at this $10 price point, and those other factors check out. Again, you're going to want to see the variations video I did. I know I'm giving you a lot of things to kind of spiderweb off from this video, but ultimately, I think that that's going to help you the most in determining the variation. If you look at all of the different pieces of information, because you'd want to check different things like review counts on the particular variation. You'd want to check how the variation's doing according to this variation section of Keepa. And ultimately, that's what I would do. But if I'm just looking at this cold, I would say if it breaks even at 10 bucks, I would test it, because it looks like as sellers come in, they are selling out. More than likely, that is what is happening, unless it's an IP issue, which I don't believe it is, just based on the fact that multiple sellers keep coming on and slowly selling out, but I could be wrong. So it's just definitely something you'd want to check in. And then we'll go to our last Keepa graph for this particular product, or this particular video, I mean. This one, they say they can source it for $50. So this is actually a pretty typical graph for something that moves very quickly. I'm not sure exactly what the question is on here, but this is something that for some people may be very confusing. It does take a little bit more time to look at all the factors here. So again, sales rank line is the very first thing. We can see this thing is just crushing it, right? I mean, the sales rank's going up and down. It's almost indiscernible in some cases. So it's selling a ton. That's what we need to know. It's selling a lot. Also, I very rarely look at this middle box. I just want to make you aware of that in case you have any questions on why I haven't referenced it. It's pretty much the same as the top box. Sometimes it will be different, and in those cases, I will check it out. But 99% of the cases, I'm not looking at this middle box. But so the sales rank line checks out. We're good there. The second thing is the pink line or the dots, and you can see that there's a lot of pink dots here. So there's so much activity that Keepa is recording a ton of different pieces of data and trying to show it on here. And it actually, these are all separate time points, but they kind of stack on top of each other. So to me, if I'm looking at this, I try to look at what the trend is even for the price. And it almost looks to me at this $100 price point, like this is pretty much the median price and it's stayed there. However, over the last 5-6 months, it has started to kind of drop. You can kind of see that line going diagonally downward. It was up here just over 100 and now it's down to 89.86 and was recently a little bit lower. So that's a little bit concerning to me. The sourcing for $50 doesn't matter as much. What matters to me is that if it's profitable or not. And if it meets my metrics. At this $89 price point, you may be making $10 or $15. In that case, I wouldn't buy it because it's not enough money. If you somehow are making $30 or $20, then I would potentially buy that because I like to make a minimum of 40% return on my investment. And so a 40% return on a $50 spend is going to be about it will be $20 at a 40% return on investment or ROI. So that would be my minimums here. If I'm meeting those minimums, then I would potentially test it. Now let's look at this third option here, the seller trend graph. You can see that there are a ton of sellers. They sold out. This is not an IP issue. This is more than likely a Q4 thing. A lot of people bought this for Christmas. And so they sold out. A bunch of sellers have come on and off throughout the year. It's been slowly, though, going up. I mean, you can see that it's gone up and down at different points, but it has been going up if you're to just draw a line through the middle of this trend. And so that is concerning. So we've got the seller count kind of going up all at once if we were to average that out. And then we also, at the same exact time, have the price points dropping inversely to the sellers going up. And so to me, that is more of a red flag because the price, because it's sourced at $50, it's currently selling around 90. I would probably stay away from it. I could be picking wrong. Maybe all these sellers continue to sell out and this price continues to rebound and I would have made 50 or 60 bucks. This one would be concerning to me because I know that if I'm spending 50 and it drops from this $89 price point down to this, $80 price point, I may actually be losing money depending on the size and weight of this product. And so those are the three things that I would look at. This one would be kind of a toss up. And so I guess that's why it was submitted. It's definitely a toss up because you can see that it sells super well. If you feel like you can break even, maybe you look at 75 bucks, right? Maybe $75 is your break even price point. Maybe this is a really small product. You buy it for 50 bucks. There's not many fees on it. And you can break even at 75. If that were the case, because it's never gone to $75, if I'm breaking even, I would test it. And the reason is because I know if I put in 50 bucks and at worst case scenario over the last year, it goes to a price that it's never been at in the last year of $75, then I'm getting my money back out. Like I don't lose anything. That to me is something that then I would test it. However, if I'm losing money at 75 or breaking even and losing money at a higher price, that is much more of a red flag in the case of this particular product. So in review, the three things you want to look for, one is the sales rank line. The second thing is the pink line or the dots if you're looking at some older information. And then the third thing would be the seller trend graph, which is that purple line in the bottom box. You want to make sure of that. Again, I do have a free Keepa guide if you're interested in learning more about how you should set up your Keepa graphs because you can pick the different bubbles that you want to be shown, the different colors, etc. Got all of that in that 16-page guide at my website at AskJimmySmith.com/Keepa guide. Check out the other Keepa videos on this channel, etc. Make sure to join the free Facebook group, bit.ly/MST group. And I think I gave you enough homework now. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you have a great rest of your day and a blessed rest of your week.